There is something that I've been wanting to blog about since last August, but I've kind of held back because it involves talking about the Holy Father, which I take very, very seriously. As I said in my video yesterday, if we destroy unity in the church, if I create in you, the viewer of this video, a spirit of hatred, of division, towards the Holy Father, towards church, towards clergy, then this is something serious that I'd have to answer in front of God. I'd have to go before God. You used your videos for the wrong end, and so I have to take very, very seriously anything that I say about the Holy Father, simply because it is, he is the successor of Peter. He is the Holy Father. But something happened to me last year at when he met some Jesuits in Portugal after the World Youth Day. And I was just reading on the La Civiltà Cattolica, what he said to the group of Jesuits at the time. I'm just going to quote you. He says, "In Rome, I know a priest who works with young homosexuals. It is clear that today the issue of homosexuality is very strong. The sensitivity in this regards changes according to historical circumstances. But what I don't like in general is that we look at the so-called sin of the flesh with a magnifying glass, just as we have done for so long with the sixth commandment. If you exploited workers, if you lied or cheated, it didn't matter. And instead sins below the waist were relevant." Now that's the exact quote that the Holy Father gave to a group of Jesuits at the time. There was a famous Jesuit that I loved a lot, and his name was Father Jorge Loring. And he wrote a book called Para Salvarte, To Save Yourself. So I read this 30 years ago, and it had all different themes about everything, really an aid to the catechism, all different parts of our faith explained. But there was one thing that came to mind when I was listening to what the Pope was saying, and it was Matthew chapter 15, verse 19. "For from the heart come evil thoughts, adultery, murder, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander." It was like our Lord, this phrase was coming to mind because there seemed to be this discussion in the church about so-called pelvic sins or sins below the waist. And I said, how did this suddenly pop out into the church? How did this come forth into the church? There doesn't exist pelvic sins or sins below the waist. All sin is connected to the heart. And it really is, if you think about it, every sin is connected to the heart. How our hearts are formed will inform how we act as human beings. And in today's church, there is such, sadly, a lack of leadership in forming hearts. And we're actually forming hearts. Informing us to know ourselves, to understand our heart, to understand how it reacts. What are we doing in our heart? There's a reason why our Lord gave us this devotion of the Sacred Heart. So we would look at him, our Lord, and say, well, there's my example of how my heart should be formed. When we are fed in the Eucharist, we are fed with the Sacred Heart. So we contemplate this Sacred Heart and we make that Sacred Heart our own. And, I love the church. I love our Holy Father. But I'm confused by what he says sometimes, especially when he mentioned it like that back in August. I said, you're really confusing me, because as a spiritual leader, we cannot separate one sin and say, oh, that area doesn't matter. All of these sins are interconnected. They're all intertwined. Do you know what I mean? If you let yourself fall in one area, it generally drags down other things. If your heart, it's very hard to have a heart or a spiritual life where, okay, I'm not chaste. You generally have other issues there in your spiritual landscape, in your spiritual environment, right? To an example being Father Marcial. Father Marcial, I was leader in Christ. So when you re-examine his life, it wasn't just that he was an abuser, that he wasn't chaste in other areas. He also wasn't poor. He also wasn't truthful. He also wasn't obedient. And so, his heart wasn't formed, because out of his heart came all of those problems. Now, outwardly, he might have appeared to have done good things, and he founded schools, and he appeared to be a nice person, and his appearance was this, but inwardly his heart wasn't formed. And so you really can't say, oh, let's leave this sin to aside. Let's leave this sin to aside. Because I was always taught in the spiritual life, small, and our Lord speaks of this, if you're faithful in small things, you'll be faithful in great things. But if you're unfaithful in the small things, it will grow to unfaithfulness in bigger things slowly. It will destroy you. So when you're forming somebody in the spiritual life, you ask them to practice, to practice. Of course, you might fail, but that's where we're all called to practice the faith, to know what the faith is, and to slowly start to practice it, to build up virtue. Now, the call to build up virtue in the church, for example, the virtue of chastity, is practically dead. Practically dead. In the amount of time that you would have priests have to talk at Mass on a Sunday, because most people aren't catechized, it is practically dead. I just have to look at the comments on my videos, and this is a Catholic channel, and I suppose a lot of people that are following me are Catholics, and I look at their comments and I say, oh, I didn't know I could do this, and I didn't know that, and I wasn't aware of this, because we haven't been fed, we haven't been formed. When I went into seminary, I learned a lot from reading Father Jorge Lowring. I said, oh, I didn't know that. Go figure. Go figure. And today it's the same thing. And I feel immense sadness in a way at our leaders in the church that are not pastoring us. And maybe with Pope Francis, maybe it's a communication problem. Maybe those that are around him are not helping the situation. I don't know. Maybe it's a bias I have. Maybe I'm biased that I'm not listening to everything that Pope Francis is saying and just picking on some areas and not disregarding others. So, I have to acknowledge the bias is there, that I feel uncomfortable sometimes how, the traditional Latin Mass is banned, which is per se in itself, it can't be bad. It can't be bad. If you're catechizing your congregation, fully catechizing and you're teaching them, and you're doing as the church will, it's something beautiful, and it's God-centered. And I suppose I'm speaking somebody here who is hurting, because the faith is beautiful, but we don't have people to teach us. Our pastors are not teaching us. The men in collars are not teaching the faith, especially the hierarchy. When the Synod of Synodality report came out in Ireland, and I read through it, and I did a video on it at the time, I said, where is union with God here? Salvation of souls. That's the whole purpose of the church. That's the whole purpose of what Christ came to do. Union with God, salvation of souls. We don't talk about this. And we have handed over to the mercy of God, saying, well, God is so merciful that I hope hell is empty. And Christ really didn't say that to us, did he? In any objective reading of the Gospels, Christ didn't say, well, the prodigal son had to get up one day and return. He had to do it, that trip. I just fear that the truths of our faith, the formation of the heart, the landscape of our faith is being slowly stripped away, slowly dissolved. Well, it has been. Because we're called to give that balance, to give that direction in the world, and we're really not doing it at this moment in time. And that's my measured opinion. And again, I love the Holy Father. I love the Church. He is our Pope. But when I see documents like Fiducia Supplicans coming out, and we're seeing priests blessing two men holding hands, and the world is looking at, okay, well, you're blessing two men holding hands. It's not just once, it's a few times it's happened now. You're giving the impression, what? And of course, we have to be careful. We have to mentor. We have to support. But we also have to give the truth. We have to. If you read the Catechism, it talks about what lying is. It's breaking somebody's connection to the truth. And in a sense, we're confirming people in a lie. And that's my thoughts on it anyway. Because there exists no sin, pelvic sin, or sins below the waist. Everything is connected to the heart. And so you have to be a leader to be able to form hearts. I was just listening to the priests, the Spanish priests, that group of Spanish priests that had come together to do a blog to promote the faith, to reform the faith, the priests of the sacristy of the Vendée. And how they've been asked by their bishops and people around them to stop blogging. But their videos were pretty good, talking about the faith. But sometimes, we have to acknowledge that there is confusion in the church. There is confusion in the church. We are not forming hearts or minds about the faith. We are simply not doing that. And look at where we've arrived to. That we will have crowds upon crowds chanting and cheering the putting abortion into constitutions in France and saying this is momentous. Let's hope more countries do this. The two drugs that are given to women, the abortion pill, try and figure out which company makes those drugs. Go on and try and figure out. And who makes the money and who funds that? Where do they come from? How does it work? What's the web behind this? Again, I wonder what Father Jorge Loring would say at that meeting with Pope Francis in Portugal last year. I would just be fascinating if he was alive. What would he say? What would he say? What is the the purpose of salvation? How are we supposed to help people on that journey? Sometimes we have warnings, I don't know if you're ever driving a car and you see the oil warning sign coming on the car, right? Okay. You see the oil warning sign. It's just an oil warning sign and it just came on. I'll be okay. I know a person that had an oil warning sign on their car and they were driving around for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden, the car, they were far away and the car stops driving it. The engine, if you don't have oil in your car, you're going to destroy your engine. And indeed, the engine was destroyed after there was no oil. And anyway, the person said, I didn't know what that sign meant in my car. Sorry, I was just miles away. And nobody actually told me what that little thing there that meant. And I said, that's the oil sign. And you have to change the oil in the car. Oh, well, I'll know for next time. It's the same in the spiritual life. There are warning signs that we need to be aware of in the spiritual life. There are warning signs. Many people haven't been told about these warning signs. And they're going about, we're fine. My conscience is fine. And God is merciful. And priests saying, well, God is merciful. He'd never let you go to hell. He'd never let you go be lost. God is all merciful. It's mercy, mercy, mercy. Everywhere. The church is mercy. We have Divine Mercy Sunday coming up soon. And mercy. The mercy is, it's like that light in the car. Yes, there's a period of mercy when the light goes on until your car ends up banjaxed. There's a period of mercy, but the period of mercy ends. Do people not realize this? A period of mercy will end. And it's the same in the church. And our leaders are asleep. Because this period is coming to an end soon. And after the period of mercy, what will come? It's the same with your car. You have a grace period. You have a mercy period. You have a time to change the oil in the car. You have a time to go to a garage, get your oil checked, and fix your car. But that period doesn't last forever. And I would ask people to learn the truths of the faith. Go to confession. Form your heart, because there exists no sins below the waist. There only exist sins that come that attack your heart. And it's the heart you need to look at. Everything comes out of the heart. As our Lord says in Matthew chapter 15, verse 19, for from the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. These are what defile you. And so, we need to mentor people on this. And again, I give this in a spirit of love for the church, and I don't hate anybody. But I would just ask church leaders to really think about this. The faith is real. The faith is critical. Our Lord didn't give us a message that we can just disregard. Because this period of mercy, the church is running with the alarm lights on in the car at the moment. There's a lot of alarm lights on in the car. And they're running along, we'll be okay. We'll get to the garage at some stage. God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.